You're listening to the Superpower Up podcast with your superpower experts. This is the place where we explore real-life superpowers and give you the tools to unlock your own.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, your superpower expert, and I have a really fun treat for you all today. We're talking today with Ed Roman, who's an award-winning singer, songwriter, performer, multi-instrumentalist, all kinds of fun stuff. But he operates in the pop, rock, folk, country music kind of space, and tons and tons and tons of like a litany of awards and all kinds of cool stuff. And I'm really excited about having him on the show because I know for a lot of you, you are very creative and you're artistic in some form or fashion, and it's really daunting to think about doing it full time. And so most of the time it's like, okay, well, you've got your job and then you've got this other thing, or you've got your business, but then there's this other thing that really lights you up. And so I'm excited to have Ed on to talk today about creative entrepreneur business, because I do think that it's a whole different ball of wax than what some folks go through. And so he can share what his journey's been with that. So please join me in welcoming Ed to the show. Welcome, Ed.
Hey, Tonya. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, well, you are quite welcome. It's our pleasure. So we're going to dive right in and ask, what are your superpowers?
That's a great question. I think it's without sounding corny, it's perception.
Sound corny. You can sound corny. That's cool.
Well, and to me, it's not. I mean, because I think this sort of like awareness to certain things has turned me on to so many different factions of the art world, as well as just my own personal experiences that sort of fuel me from day to day, from the things that I experience working outside in my garden to conversations that I have with people, or just moments that are punctuated by these, well, that is too crazy to be coincidence, and I can't chalk that up to that. So for me, I'm fueled by that, whether it be in the leg of the paranormal, or as I mentioned, and sometimes to me, this sort of concept behind writing has a sort of spiritual connection to it, and I think it's a relinquishment of the ego and the self in order to find how this moment is pulling you through it. And for me, that's what keeps it fresh, is that experience is always changing. If you try to put the math on it, especially in the art world, when people are like, well, that's a hit song, let's write more. Well, look, that song's already been written. And without sounding like overly artsy fartsy about it all, I'm trying to like experience, write, and then express. So to me, that's what it is. My dad, I grew up in the 70s, so it's like if you weren't paying attention and you grew up on a farm like I did, you could be either hit by a tractor, taken down by a cow. We were forced to do so many because of circumstance, not because of my dad. How do we fix this? Well, you got to fix it yourself, from electrical to plumbing to working with animals. It was all kind of all encompassing. And I see a lot of parallels to my life and what I do today.
I think that's so perfect. And I think it's necessary to call that stuff out. It's all encompassing, right? We talk a lot about, living, breathing, being in the full embodiment of our superpowers and what lights us up, and doing our work in the world and all that fantastic stuff. Well, those elements have to be there, and you have to be willing to suspend your disbelief a little bit and say, maybe this is for a purpose. Maybe there is a reason I'm experiencing this, or I'm meeting this person, or the synchronicities are just too great to ignore, like you said. So talk to me a little bit about how you got into music. I mean, it's a tough industry, and but I can imagine. So when you feel at home in it and at peace in it, I can only imagine how fulfilling that can be.
Beautiful question, Tonya. And it was really my mom, and through my own problem, being sort of labeled as a dyslexic with a learning disability in the 1970s was like traumatic for me. And it was really tough for me in school, struggling on an academic level. And my mom, God bless her. She, we want to put, your son on Ritalin. No, like my son has an issue with timing and understanding a word, because a word is so difficult to pronounce. And she spent hours of time with me reading, practicing, with these rulers, night after night with these flashcards, pronunciation things. And it was then she realized, look, I'm going to put a guitar in this kid's hand, because he's always playing the piano and making up his own songs and telling stories at the dinner table. And I was a bit of a ham. And it was her encouragement that really like accelerated me and broke me out of that shell and gave me that sense of realization. Today, I now at the age of 82, I have these conversations with her, beautiful, and I say to her, like, Mom, you know, like, thank you for doing that, because it's now those basic things that we were talking about before, where we relinquish ourselves from, I'm an adult, I don't do this, you know, that childlike behavior and mentality sort of permeates, you know, and it becomes an adventure. Like, my mom has this wonderful like disposition about life. When it comes to, you know, every day is a gift. I just actually wrote that into a lyric for a new record that I'm working on. And to me, I see that. And again, when you release that, you start to find, wait, there's more meaning behind this. Those basic, simple things are so strong now. And maybe as a young kid, especially as a teenager, when you're rebelling, you take those things for granted because you're finding yourself. You're doing all those kinds of things. But then going like, well, then how do I make a living at this? You know, and how do I make it a lifestyle, a choice? It was all those basic things that keeps me fueled. It keeps me going from like, well, if I don't have this tune on a record or on a radio station right now, that's okay, because I'm still working. I always say to people, you know, yeah, it's great to receive awards or be on lists, but man, Tonya, I'm just so happy to practice my craft from day to day. And I guess that's the same kind of people I looked up to as a young artist, were those people that had this sort of, you know, it's not encyclopedia, but a work, a library of stuff that they could look back on, but never really looked back on. They just kept moving forward. Zappa was one of those people that I liked, where you would record something and people said, well, you don't listen back to the stuff that you do. And it's no, like, I mean, it's already done. I'm not that vain to sit there and go, oh, look what I did, right? Like, I mean, you got to listen. You've been listening to it in the studio for months trying to get everything together. So it's like, the last thing you want to do is be sitting there listening to yourself. So it's a journey thing. And I guess, Tonya, that's what keeps that fresh. When the struggle is there, that artistic way of thinking inside of the business world keeps you fresh. Keeps it fresh. I mean, for a while I was working with puppets, and lately I've been thinking about doing a stop animation thing with Pezzes for a video of mine. And, you know, just being crazy, like you said, to have that fun experience, it just makes that other part sort of disappear. And when it does happen, when it does click, when you are on the radio, when you are connecting, it's like, okay, good, things are working. That's what I was working towards.
Beautiful, really beautiful. And what a gift that your mom was and is in your life. So gorgeous. Oh, so let's tell people where they can go to find out more about you, and then we'll take a quick break.
edroman.net is where you can go, and all my social networking buttons are there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, my YouTube channel. You can check out the latest lyric video that's out for the latest album, Red Omen. And the latest album's out, so get it everywhere. It's all over the place. It's
all like over the place.
In your face, Tonya.
Yeah, you should have it. If you don't have it, you should have it for sure. Very cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Ed Roman today about creative entrepreneur business, and we will be right back, folks. Stick with us.
Are you here to change the world? Do you talk about things like vibration, frequency, awakening, and consciousness? Are you pretty sure you have superpowers? The Superpower Net is unlike normal coaching programs and conscious communities. We provide training, intuitive guidance, peer-to-peer learning, intensive one-on-one coaching, and a high vibrational network of people just like you. When you join the net, you get 24/7 access to a collaborative group of people who support you as you master your personal power and unlock your superpowers. If you're ready to use your superpowers to change the world, then join the Superpower Net today. Visit superpowerexperts.com/thenet to learn more.
Awesome. We're back. You're listening to the Superpower Up podcast. We're talking today with Ed Roman about creative entrepreneur business. So Ed, before the break, we talked a lot about how your mom was such a pivotal point in that early upbringing and your perspective on everything, her beautiful message of every day is a gift. So what do you do now kind of to pay that back, or to even move it forward a little bit with regard to your music and obviously you're touching lives and that energy is just, kind of emanates off of you. But do you keep that in mind? Like, what's next for you with regard to expanding that out even further?
That's another amazing question with a lot of gravity, because I think, aside from the craft and enjoying what I do, playing an instruments, writing songs, singing to people, playing to people, there's always been this sort of underpinning for me, and that's why I fell in love with music, is that, I saw at moments in time where music had such sociological change and or at the same time helped. When growing up watching Live Aid, in the 80s and other things where I saw like pivotal things was like, let's get together and raise money. Let's change the way that the cosmetic of this looks right now, because it's unjust. And I guess that for me, that's what I've always felt like. Somehow music, it calms the savage beast. It brings people together. Look at this Finding Sugar Man concept, and the stuff that happened in South Africa with his music that he didn't even realize was going on. For me, I want to start some music schools. I, as a teacher and taught for many years, started to realize that tactical approach to that artistic craft that we have isn't as prevalent as it was when I was a kid. And in some cases where I've been in the world, and especially in the West Indies, Jamaica specifically, there isn't a lot of education for young kids. And we've been in talks with the last surviving singing member of Bob Marley and the Wailers, Bunny Wailer, Neville Livingston himself, to try to do this fundraising project to raise money for these portable schools. They're like a bookmobile, but it's like a music school on a bus. And it doesn't just have to happen in Jamaica. It can happen everywhere, because like even in Canada where we are, the reason the private music schools or private teaching was happening so often was because there just isn't music programs in the schools anymore. So and I see the thirst and the hunger, and at the same time, that excitement that I remember when I was a kid about getting an instrument, having somebody to spend some time with you, to teach you something, and then watching the kinetic aspect of it change many people's lives. The kids that are around that child that's learning, that sees that skill, that wants to learn, the potato chip factor used to call it. It's like, oh, once they see it, they want to try it, And I saw that happen so often when I was there, and I've seen it happen with other kids. So I guess that's why your question has a lot of gravity, because it's kind of like, that Joyce Kilmer feeling that I get sometimes, where it's old men plant trees whose shade they'll never enjoy. I'm hoping that little bit of momentum helps. The story behind even Bob Marley was that, he begged this guy in a store, for a guitar when he was a kid living in Kingston after he'd come out of St. Anne's, and he was living in Kingston. And the guy just got tired of Bob begging him. And he just said, take it, get out of here, leave me alone. And then I think like the rest is history. So just with a little bit of effort and using to, excuse the pun, music bus as a vehicle to help bring that message, I'm like, well, how can we get more people involved? How can we get more people helping? With every musician I know, in some faction in our lives, we've all been teaching our teachers, and we'll probably continue to teach. It's kind of what the craft's all about, and a big part of it. So that's really what I'm hoping for, is that sort of effigy moment, carved in stone, saying, well, we started this. And now it's happening, and it's in perpetual motion because of the enthusiasm behind it.
Wow, what a powerful statement. And I love just the beauty in everything that you said. And I can feel where your heart is with all of this. And I think you're right. I think that, there are a lot of mechanisms that we use throughout humanity to connect with each other, but music is by far one of the most obvious, and it's undeniable what that does. As you were talking about Live Aid and all these other things that we've seen, I do think that the purpose behind it is so important, and it leads to success, right? Like, anymore with the advent of the internet and social media and everything else, that we want to know what people stand for. We want to know if there's purpose behind it. We want to feel the people and connect with them, not just follow blindly. And so when you talk about building creative businesses and being a creative business entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur in business, or however you want to frame it, one, you can't separate out the business aspect because you have to be able to make it work. But two, you can't separate out the purpose piece from the business aspect. Because I think if you try to do that, then it just becomes heartless, and kind of robotic. And I think we've seen examples of that in artistry where they did lose the purpose or they did lose their heart in the midst of it. And it became too rote, too whatever, mechanized or whatever the case may be for each individual. Without that lifeblood that flows through it, you can't touch people. No matter how great your reach is, it will dwindle because that's the energy that fuels all of those movements. And so you obviously have that in spades, and I think it's beautiful.
Well, and you're, again, Tonya, so true to form what you were saying, because I think that's another reason why, and it kills me sometimes when I hear, I don't know, one of those iconic songs, classics that are now part of a commercial program, a car commercial, an insurance program. But then again, they are buying and selling the rights to what those things are. They understand the potential behind those words. And for exactly what you said, that mojo that's sitting inside of it, the reason the song was written has a lot more to do with than just the clinical, songwriting mechanism of well, here's the commercial number. Because that's not what an art form is. There's part of it that's craft, but the other part of it has a lot to do with philosophy. And if somehow that isn't sort of interwoven in there in the most delicate of ways, it's like a bad cake recipe gone awry, It's just not going to feel right. It's not going to have that same sense of sincerity to it. And I think, even as a writer, you must experience the same thing too. You think, well, wait, where's this coming from? Why am I searching here? Because it seems too deliberate. I'm not listening to the overall bit of information that's kind of coming in. And I'm having this experience now writing, even before this interview, going through this process of editing a whole bunch of paragraphs that I've just written, because I realized, well, yeah, that was the flow. But here's sort of the punctuation in behind it. And then it becomes that, yes, that feeling that you get behind it. Yes, that's a good idea. That totally makes sense. Those epiphany moments, it happens all the time. And when you recognize it, it's oh, right, life.
Sorry, I was laughing, and it's like this idea that we really can have the audacity to be present in our existence and to insist upon a fulfilling life and to demand it in a lot of ways, but also to encourage others to demand that as well. So what's the best advice you have for budding artists, creatives, folks who know they want to do it full time, and maybe the business piece doesn't appeal to them too much, but it's kind of a necessary evil with regard to all of it. What advice do you have about how they can kind of stay the course, or just something you wish you had known starting out?
Wow, that's great. And you know what? It's funny because on a business level, it was the same thing as I was just talking about in terms of the creative flow, because I've come up with marketing ideas, the lunch boxes filled with all the paraphernalia at the shows with the CDs and t-shirts, and it was all cool and people still have them and things. But what I found is that through that same process, what has kept me connected to that independent business world in terms of that is talking about process. As a person, I love documentaries. I love, shows on archaeology and stuff that's sort of the process. And when I talk about that, for me, personally, I've found, and I wish somebody had told me that, and I meant be yourself. Well, my mom's always told me to be myself, but the business world sort of dictates marketing and strategy and how do you fit into this sort of box. The more I'm myself and talk about myself in terms of the process, the art process, the more things happen. It's almost like that has sort of led me to this process of non-process, if you will, which means instead of worrying so much about how to market myself, because I have a wonderful PR man down in Pittsburgh, Michael Stover, it flows because of the way we work the art into the fold. Michael listens to the music. He understands who I am and, kind of my MO. And at the same time, he wouldn't put me on a show or get me involved with something that would be totally out of the scope of things. That doesn't necessarily mean I can't handle a show like that. But at the same time, it's allowed me to be myself, Tonya, to talk to people like you, to be on this show and have these conversations, to say, well, here's my method, and that's been my marketing strategy. And the more and more I talk about just, okay, yeah, I'm growing vegetables. I love carrots and the oddest things. It's like it seems to all of a sudden accelerate everything else I do on a musical level. And I get new fans and people download more music and I end up on more Spotify playlists. And all of that stuff is just like, well, Mom was right. Just be yourself. It's
beautiful.
It's sort of weird and corny, like I say, but it's not like I'm not wearing, disco pants and getting haircuts. I'm just being Ed.
But yeah, absolutely. Don't get haircuts. That's a real thing. I appreciate that. And it is fascinating how we like to make things so complex only to work ourselves around to realizing they're really not that complex. Right. And so I appreciate the simplicity. A lot of times, obviously you and I do very, very different things in the world, but I think we actually are doing the exact same thing in the world. And my clients, a lot of times will say, oh, you make it sound so easy. I was like, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's our most normal, or it's our most natural state of existence. It's just not normal. And so the idea of being yourself sounds really simple, but it's just not normal. We don't give ourselves permission to do that. We don't often give other people permission to do that. And so it's really, there is a lot of bravery and courage that goes into that. And I appreciate everything that you're saying. To piggyback off of the conversation piece, I once had someone tell me that, your business is a conversation. And if you're not talking about it, nobody's talking about it. Exactly. And, if you're a creative and it stands on you and the essence of who you are and it's coming through you, then you are your business. And I did an interview earlier today with someone who was talking about how, we're in two different businesses. One of them is the business of being seen. And you got to get okay with that. And it's not necessarily from an ego standpoint. It's from a delivery system perspective. One of our experts, Jennifer Urezio, talks about the difference between your mission and your delivery system. Well, part of our delivery system is us. And so I love the fact that unabashedly you're like, I talk about me. I talk about the fact that I like carrots, which, by the way, I hope you're growing those like heritage ones, those heirloom ones, the purple and white ones, and they're so tasty.
Hey, I still have 4 buckets on my porch, on the staircase. I eat from them every day. I haven't bought a potato in over 10 years.
So I feel like you should send me those.
But wait, back to your thing on the piggyback of that. You know what? That's so true. And we do come from different worlds, and don't we all? And that's what makes the cross-pollination of humanity so amazing. But passion, I should have really said, is another part of that superpower aspect, because it goes back to gardening again. When I was a kid and my mom gave me the 5x5 patch with my dad, and this is what are you going to grow? You have to grow it. What are you going to grow? How are you going to tend it? You have to pull the weeds. You're going to share it. Whatever it was that sense of like responsibility. But the passion that I saw in my grandparents for the things they did with their hands was paramount. The passion that I saw from my parents for the things that they did with their hands was paramount. And I guess it was like almost pulling young children from the ground, like turnips and potatoes. It's like it's personal victory, and that passion is the same thing that you're talking about, whether you're a shoe salesman or you're behind a pulpit or you're I'm going to say it, not a politician, but a public official, a public servant, I should say. All of those things are, we're all driven by passion. If you're not, I think, why are you doing it? That's the ultimate thing. Right.
Beautiful. Well, I think you're pretty special, Ed, and I'm glad that you took some time to come on the show and share a little bit of your light and your energy and your vibrancy with our listeners and with me. I thank you.
You too, Tonya. It's such a pleasure talking to you. A wonderful electric voice. It just feels full of juice.
Awesome. I love it. Well, let's remind folks where they can go to find out more about you and to hear your music.
That would be edroman.net, ladies and gentlemen. There's my social networking buttons that are there. Everything from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Please check out the new record. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube right now. A bunch of videos, singles that are out. Get the new record. It's red. It's red.
It's red. So you have to have it.
You have to have it. It's a frequency. I mean, it's a duality color. Do I eat the berry or do I leave the berry?
I don't know. What do you do?
Is it a red heart or is it a red stop sign?
See, in my world, it's more the red pill or the blue pill.
Well, and you know what? I hear that one too. And I guess that's why Red Omen and the anagram and even the name of the album exists, because as a dyslexic, looking at language for long periods of time sort of forced me into asking questions. And I was always like, well, where does that word come from? Why does it exist? And then I see these certain things, like I always say to people, what's a mortgage? And people are like, it's a mortgage. The bank gives you a loan from the bank and you get your house, start your business. Yeah, but what does mortgage mean?
Yeah.
Morta, here's the blue pill, red pill, right factor, meaning, death, and to gauge, to grip or grasp, mortgage means death grip. And they're like, oh, you're what? No. I'm like,
what?
What?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the rooster goes off. And then it's like, okay, I took the pill. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I remember the moment we realized like spelling was like the art of spell casting, like spelling, like words are powerful. My word is milk. Like milk is like the funniest word in the world to me. And it may have something to do with a comedy routine by, oh gosh, what's his name now? I can see his face. Anyway, he talked about, he did a hilarious routine about, he called it moo cow. Well, I can put the explicit rating on the show. He called it moo cow fuck milk. And that was his, gosh, who is he? I'm going to have to look him up now. It was the funniest freaking routine. But I think about the word milk and I'm like, what a bizarre word. Like, where did this word come from? Anyway. All right. Well, we digress. But thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your time and space with us today. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best. And please let us know how we can continue to support you.
Thank you so kindly. And I'd love to, obviously, spreading and sharing the word about the show. And thank you again, really, for having me as a guest. It's been great talking to you.
Perfect. You as well. And to all of you out there, as always, we appreciate your loyalty and we thank you for listening. So go out, uncover your superpowers, and change the world. Take care, everyone.
Carrot.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and discover your superpowers today.